Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to our next video lesson. We're going to create a sphere calculator, but the way that we're going to do that is to create a class. And then from that class we can create all kinds of spheres like marble, basketball, baseball, ball bearing, so forth and so on. All of those are spheres that have a surface area and a volume. And the nice thing about creating a class is that it comes self-contained with all the nouns and all the verbs that act on those nouns. So what I did was, after I created my graphical user interface, and as you can see over here from the properties panel, this text box is txt radius. We have a button over here, btn calculate. We have a label over here, lbl surface area. And we have another label over here, lbl volume. So that takes care of all of the various names. Now what I want to do is to create the sphere class. And so what I'll do is I'll open up the Solution Explorer. You most likely will see the Solution Explorer tab over here, but let's say that you don't see it. You can just simply go to View and then click on Solution Explorer, and then here it is. In this area over here, you will right-click and you will add a new item. So we'll click on New Item, and what you want to do is to create a class. Now down over here, since we are going to be creating the sphere class, you will replace this word class with sphere and then leave the .vb alone. Now I've already done that, so I'm going to click cancel. But when you do that, then this thing is going to pop up. The name of the class is sphere, and so that's what you see over here. Alright, so we're going to have private and also public members. So I'll type in private radius as double. Now what you want to do is, when you're creating a class, you have to think about what is that root element that kind of defines everything else about this class. Well, clearly the radius defines everything about a sphere. If you were thinking about a cube, then it would be the width and the height and the depth, say for example. So then I would have three private variables, width, height, and depth. Let's see here. If we were thinking about a triangle, then it would be the base and the height, right? That's the fundamental part of the triangle. You set the base and the height, and now I can get the perimeter, I can get the surface area, I'm sorry, the area of the triangle, so forth and so on. So that's how you're supposed to think about it. Next, let's create a constructor. So we'll say public sub new open and close parentheses, and we're going to call this the default constructor. And what the constructor does is it sets up everything before you actually start your program. It's as if you and I went to the track and said, okay, you guys ready for a race around the track? Well, better tie your shoes, better get a drink of water, make sure that you are stretched out, and then ready, go. So the constructor took care of all that stuff before we actually go. So the constructor is typically used for setting up those instance variables. Well, if the user says, I would like to create a sphere, and if they don't give us any parameters, then what we're going to do is we're just going to say, okay, I guess we set the radius to 0, because you didn't give us a value of what to set it to. So typically a constructor is used for initializing these variables. What do you want them to be? Okay. Now I want you to type public sub new, and then within your parens we'll say by value, which means you are sending a copy. We're going to call this thing radius parameter is the argument as double. Now we call this guy an overloaded constructor. And the overloaded constructor, what happens is you give me a parameter, and then based on that parameter, I'm going to assign that to the private instance variable. So simply put, I can do this. Radius is going to be the thing that you sent to me. Well, you said that the radius parameter, for example, is 10. Okay, so I will now assign that to this, to 10. Now, I could be more restrictive if I wanted to. For example, let me press enter over here. Is there such a thing as a negative radius? No, there isn't. So I could say if radius parameter is less than, as long as radius parameter is greater than 0, then, okay, then we could do this. Let me cut this and paste it in here. Hey, if you give me a value that's greater than 0, I will allow you to reset radius. So that's a criteria, and that's the nice thing about this overloaded constructor. We can control how you set the private instance variable. So you don't have access to this, it's private. So I need to create a public function to determine how I can set this thing. And my criteria is, as long as you give me a positive number, I'll set the radius. But otherwise, I'm not going to do that. I'll just let it be 0. So I'll just say else the radius is going to be set to 0. If you didn't give me, oops, let me get rid of radius like that. If you didn't give me a positive value, then I've got to give radius a value of 0. So again, I'm controlling how this thing works. Now it's time for us to create our setters and getters. So we'll say create setters, and this is like an industry term, setters and getters. And some people say mutators. Some people say accessors. Fancy names for either you're getting data or you're setting data. Okay. And the way that we do that is as follows. We'll say public property. So what properties do I have? Well, first of all, the property is going to be based on the radius parameter. We'll say as double. See, you are going to give me a value. Let me see here. Hold on for a second here. Public property. How come that didn't?
It's capitalized?
Yeah, it's supposed to be. In this case, it is supposed to be capitalized. Yes. And we'll say end property. And that's going to be over here. That's going to be part of this. We're going to say get, enter. And if you want to get the radius, you will have to abide by this. And what happens is when you say I need the value of the radius, this is what you're going to be calling. It'll give you the value of the radius. Now, if you are going to set the value of radius, well, again, I'm going to have to determine is value, the thing that you're giving to me, is that thing greater than 0? Because if it is, then I will set radius, the private variable, to the value that you just gave to me. Now, if that's not the case, then I will set the radius to 0. So we refer to this as the getter, see the word get, and the setter. Either radius parameter is a property that's going to allow you to get the value of radius or to set the value of radius. And we need that because this thing is private, right? So we call this information hiding. We're hiding some information from the user, and we're also hiding how we process this stuff. The user doesn't want to know that. If you have a car that when you press the accelerator and the car goes, that's fine. The user doesn't care if it's electric or if it's gasoline or if there's a bunch of hamsters in a hamster wheel turning really fast. Who cares about how the car goes? You push on the accelerator and it goes. Same thing over here. Who cares about how this thing is implemented? As long as it does its job, we're fine. Okay, so now we're going to create a public function. We'll call this get surface area as double. So what get surface area does is it determines what the surface area is and it returns that value. Now notice that I have the green squiggly underline, meaning that I haven't returned anything yet. I haven't used the return word. Well, first of all, let me go back over here and remind myself for surface area, is that right? Yeah, for surface area, it looks like the equation for a sphere is 4 pi r squared. All right, so we're going to return 4 times pi times r squared. So I can use math.pow and say whatever the radius is, we're going to square that. Right, because this is 4 pi r squared. So 4 pi r squared. So we're simply going to return the value of this mathematical equation. So that's a function that we can call. Why can I call it? Because it's public. I have access to it. Now I'm going to create another public function. called get volume as double. Now what get volume does is it returns the mathematical result of another equation. Let me go back over here and remind myself what it is. So it looks like for volume, that's 4 divided by 3 pi r cubed. Okay, so we're going to return 4 divided by 3 times pi times, and it looks like it's r cubed. So we can use math.pow for that. Whatever the radius is, cube it. So 4 divided by 3 pi r cubed. This function called getVolume does that. Now I could have said calculate volume, calculate surface area. You come up with whatever the name is. This is not necessarily a getter, even though I'm using the word get. It's a solution to a particular equation. And so you can come up with your own naming equation. I'm tempted to actually say this is calc surface area or calc volume. But the idea of get surface area does seem kind of attractive because you are going to get this value. It's returning a double, and here's the mathematical equation that satisfies that. All right, so now you have everything that you need about spheres. You can, as long as you are provided the volume, the radius, you can determine what the volume is, you can determine what the surface area is, and then give that information back to the user. And all of this is nicely and compactly fit into the sphere.vb file or the sphere.vb class. Okay, so I'm going to click Save All, and now let's use this sphere class so that we can create any type of sphere that we want by instantiating it. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go back over here to form1.vb design, and let me just make sure that I named all these guys here. So this one is txt radius, btn calculate, LBL surface area, LBL volume. Perfect. So I'm going to double click on the button. So it takes me to the code area. And of course I'm going to have declarations. And I'm going to get the user input. And then I'm going to perform any type of calculation, and output will be placed here. All right, so let's create a sphere. So we'll say dim marble as new sphere. And so notice how I only have to type in a couple of words, and it already comes up because this is a class that I already created inside of this project. So I'll just simply double click this guy, press enter. So marble is a sphere that means that it contains all those things that we talked about. It has radius, it has two functions that can calculate the surface area and the volume. We have getters, we have setters. But we also need to determine what the radius is. So we'll say user radius as double. And that's something that the user has the ability to enter. So over here, they're going to enter the radius. So what I'll do is I'll say user radius is going to be convert dot to double whatever is inside of the text box txt radius. So we get that value, convert it to a double, put that into txt radius. Well, now that I have that value, I can determine what the surface area and also the volume is, but I better first make sure that my sphere called marble, in fact, we have to change the radius. So I'll say marble dot. All right, so here's a list of all of the things that I have access to. And so one of the things that I have access to is the radius parameter. So I'll double click this and we'll say this thing is going to be whatever user radius is. So this can serve as a getter, this can also serve as a setter. As you recall back over here, radius parameter, over here I created that as a property. And so a property means I have access to either the getter or the setter. Well, in this case I want access to the setter. So if I give you this, you are now going to change the radius for marble. Well, once I have that, then I can just simply send the results to the label. So it looks like I've got to put stuff into surface area and into volume. Okay, so LBL surface area, text. We'll say convert dot to string, open and close parentheses, and then I'll put my cursor right back in here. Well, what is it that I want to convert to a string? Well, I want to convert to a string the surface area of the marble. So marble dot. All right, so what can I use to get the surface area? Oh, here it is right here. Get surface area. In fact, look at this thing. It shows you that it's going to return to you a double. So I double click that, get surface area, press enter. LBL volume dot text. In a similar way, we are going to convert to string, open and close parentheses. I'll put my cursor right back in there. Obviously, we want the volume of the marble. Well, we went through all that hard work to create the class, so all I have to do now is just marble dot, and it looks like this guy over here is what I want, get the volume. In fact, you see over here, it returns a double. So I double click over here, and now I'm able to determine what the surface area and the volume is. We can run the program, and let's see what happens. Okay, so over here, let's say that I have a volume or a radius of 2.5. Okay, so here are the numbers. If I wanted to, I could restrict the amount of numbers that are after the decimal point. So let's see if this is correct. I think if I go back over here and if I type in formula, yeah, here we go. So I said 2.5. So it looks like that's 65.45. 65.45, good. And then how about for the surface area? And again, I'm going to enter 2.5. It looks like that's 78.54. 78.54, yep, that's it. All right, so now you are finished with your main program that has taken advantage of this thing that you called marble. Now I could actually create another sphere called golf ball. Now that also is a new sphere, and I'm going to set that to a value, say for example. Right? I could sorry, do not set that to a value. What I'm just trying to do is just to show you that I could create as many spheres as I want. So basketball. So forth and so on. Notice that the object is always lowercase. Notice that the class, anytime you use the word new, that's always going to be uppercase because you instantiate an object from a class, and you can create as many of these as you want. So let me ask you, can you create an array of spheres? Absolutely. I could create all kinds of different spheres individually or within an array, and then I could call upon those within a for statement to get the radius for all of those, and then I have a bunch of spheres within an array, say for example. So there's a lot of things that you can do as a result of this sphere class. And then all I have to do in a new program is just simply import this sphere.vb file, and now I have the ability to quickly determine what the surface area and the volume is because all the work has been done for me. And that's it. So this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. We'll see you next time.